I think it's harder than you think at unexpected moments that no one prepares
So
you for.
not ambitious. You said as a child you knew you wanted to start a business at the age of 30.
Yeah,
That's
no, I
pretty
think
ambitious, right?
that's pretty ambitious. You know nothing, let's teach you your craft. And they were tough, so tough, but I learned so much from them. And it was like, I'm so grateful for their toughness. It was like a sort of, it was a baptism of knowledge by
A
fire.
grown up podcast. So everyone listening, I want to, and I'm very excited to introduce Tamara Gillan, who is an award-winning entrepreneur, speaker, champion for women, and a natural-born collaborator and communicator. Alongside her philanthropic work with organisations like the UN, she ran Cherry London, one of the UK's most influential partnership agencies, and has subsequently founded FFinc, which was formerly WealthiHer and the WHN Group, which functions both as an amazing women's network and advisor to corporates around the world. Tamara, I'm so excited to have you here for the podcast today. So I want to kick off with a very broad question. Just tell us a little bit about your journey into adulthood and what it feels like being a grown up to you.
Firstly, I am thrilled to be here as your first guest. I think pleased as punch, and I think what a woman, and what such interesting question to open with. And actually, the song comes to mind. Looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid. My mum used to say that I still feel like a little kid, and she always had this playfulness about her, and she still does. And I still at times feel like a little kid, and I see the joy and the wickedness in things, the wicked humor in things, not the wickedness in things. And I just think that we, for me, that playfulness and moments of youth which are about, things are still fresh, you can still learn, you can still be amazed by the world, are really important to me. My journey here, it's funny, it's been curvy, it's been very curvy, like me. My life as a child was very, very all over the world, literally. I grew up in London until I was 10. My dad was an East Ender. His family were like East End, East End. My grandfather was a bare knuckle fighter out of the war
Wow.
to pay for his family. My mother was a Kiwi from a family of eight, six sisters who'd come to London, married her landlord. My dad, was someone who, left school with no education, but they believe, he was the entrepreneurial inspiration for me. And he was always like, if you graft, if you have ideas, if you have integrity, if you invest in people, people invest in you. And so he actually built himself out of the East End, literally. And so we moved from Kilburn. And I remember lots of his bricklayers were Irish brickies, and then we moved to Harrow on the Hill, which was very different. And then we moved to New Zealand. Then we moved to a
Wow.
farm in New Zealand when I was 12. And so I went from this sort of just such a different path through life. And we had pigs and horses and a winery, and that was a wonderful life. And I think it always made me very adaptive, being able to make friends, and I think being able to make relationships. But it also made me a bit of an adventurer. Like, I like risk, and I also like, new situations don't terrify me. Sometimes I think after the pandemic and the cost of living, I'm like, can we just have a bit of calm, But that's definitely made me an adventurer and a people person, because you just have to fit in and get on. And
So tell me a little bit about kind of early adulthood, kind of your 20s, and how you kind of got to how you've got to where you are now with FFinc.
so I went to university in New Zealand, and I did business administration, history, which was a joy, and I did business administration, and I was always going to come here and I was going to start a business at 30, which I did. I did what New Zealanders call an OE, went on a big travel adventure with my backpack. It was horrific, had to eat cans of baked beans to survive, but I saw lots of Europe, and it was all very wondrous, coming from a small town farming agricultural land. And I arrived with this book called Faith Popcorn, which was about marketing to women. And I basically said, when I'm 30, I'm going to start this business. It's going to be all about marketing to women. And I'm going to work at some agencies in London. So create marketing agencies, learn my stripes. And then I'm going to do a corporate job, and then I'm going to start, which I did through this very crazy experience. My first job in London was with Southwark Council, which was an experience in and of itself. But I managed, as I always do, to find an interesting project, which was to be part of the branding team that rebranded Borough Market. So it was that wonderful experience in this
Wow.
crazy public experience of working in a council in Southwark, which was almost, it was sort of, again, I saw it as an adventure in this wonderful project. But I decided that council life was not for me once that once that project was complete. And my next job, I went to a digital agency, and they had just basically IPO'd. It was the first digital boom of the 2000. My first job with them is they created avatars that they built up as a digital sort of profile of this avatar, and then they sold them for millions of pounds to brands. So we sold Sonia to Sony. We There was another one that was sold to a German energy company. And then I was given Psychosmos and Isaias, very German, I said, to launch as the UK's first digital pop star with £1 million budget. And I was 24 years old, wearing a red puffer suit. and it was very surreal. And I remember going to a meeting with Pat Gaffey, who was head of BA rewards program. And Psychosmos was this sort of cyber world where you built this profile. And I remember sitting in front of him in my red puffer suit, my favorite suit, and saying, BA needs this. If all travelers could build a Psychosmos profile, then you'd know so much about them. And I thought, why is this man taking the meeting? And not surprisingly, weeks later, everything crashed and burned, and I had no job, nothing. And I was like thinking, what am I gonna do? It was the full bust. And I was really lucky and went to work for some really serious Procter and Gamble trained marketeers. And it was they were like, little girl in the puffer suit, get rid of it. You know nothing. Let's teach you your craft. And they were tough, so tough. But I learned so much from them. And it was like, I'm so grateful for their toughness. It was like it was a baptism of knowledge by fire.
And then so Cherry London, tell me a bit about Cherry London and then your journey to FFinc.
Yeah, so I actually started. So I went to Orange. Headed up their digital marketing team, and then I purposefully got a job at Vodafone, so that I could go on gardening leave for 6 months. And I actually was sitting next to my boss, Jeremy Dale, and actually they always walked people out the door when they got a job at Vodafone. But in my instance, I had just led a reinvention of the whole digital, all of our sort of website, mobile messaging. And so my boss didn't walk me out the door. So I had to sit in management meetings, writing down everything he was saying and drawing diagrams of his strategy in really big letters. And then finally on the third meeting, he was like, Tamara, I don't think you should be here with you going to Vodafone. I was like, hallelujah, thank goodness, put me on gardening leave. So he's like, I think you should go home and HR will talk to you. And so yes, I built Cherry London from there. I rang and told my boss a couple of months later, I'm not going to do it, I'm doing this. He said, just be quiet, just do Cherry London. And Cherry London grew to be, I'd seen that there was this area of partnership marketing and digital, but a very specialism in partnership marketing. And if you could develop a specialism where you said, how do you put big businesses together that actually they are a win-win for those brands, but they're a win-win for the objectives of those brands, but also people, customers. So we were really lucky. First client was Visa. We did London 2012, aligning the co-sponsors. We built O2 Priority over 11 years. We won Red Bull, Procter & Gamble, Jaguar Land Rover doing their partnerships, HSBCs around the world, so for many, many years. So it was an amazing heyday of partnerships, I have to say, and we grew to about 50 people, lots of awards, brilliant people work with me. They've gone on to be the best partnership people in the UK and across the pond, and it was a great training ground, a great experience. And I had some great business people with me, which always I loved the journey. And it was in there that Think and WealthiHer started, because I went to a serendipitous meeting where someone didn't turn up and the junior came, who was very not so junior, Forbes 30 under 30, wanted to sort of change the world. And she said, do you reckon you could ever set up a network that united the finance industry behind women? Because it's my big passion. And I was like, yes, I've built networks, I've built big customer programs, I'm really good at partnerships, let's give it a go. And we basically launched 6 months later. Her name was Lauren von Stackelberg. She was there, all the way. And then she got married and went on this year-long sabbatical, stayed at my parents' house in New Zealand. And we launched, I think while she was there for that. She was there for that. She came back for that. We launched with 13 partners, many of which, including HSBC, is still with us today. And then the pandemic hit.
Gosh, so quite a journey. So thinking back to your 18-year-old self off to university in New Zealand, what would they recognise about you now? And what would they be absolutely amazed by?
I think they'd still see the fire in me that has always been passionate and always been very not ambitious, but I always want to achieve things. I always want to, change the game. I always, that has remained. I think they probably.
You say not ambitious. You said as a child you knew you wanted to start a business at the age of 30.
Yeah,
That's
no,
pretty ambitious, right?
that's pretty ambitious. That's pretty ambitious. That is pretty ambitious.
And
And
you
it was
did it.
always, and I did it. And I did it. I think that what they wouldn't recognize, and I didn't realize, is probably I'm a bit more balanced than I was. But, and life puts some knocks in you, which is a good thing because it means that you're much more measured in the decisions that you make, and you
Mm.
think about the things that you're not good at. And I think as a entrepreneur, your training camp is success and failure, and you don't really have anyone that sort of your experiences are teaching you, but then the getting it wrong is teaching you more. And I think that has been a wonderful lesson. But one of the things I've recently done is got an executive coach again, because I thought I need someone else to help me accelerate my own learning, because I haven't
Hmm.
gone. There are edges that are still not as good as I would like them to be. And yeah, so I think that I would think they would say, "Oh, you're a lot more balanced. There's some more perspective in you." Still a little kid.
Fabulous. So you touched on kind of that you've had ups and downs like everyone does over kind of careers and lives. What's the biggest struggle that's made you who you are?
I'm outrageous, so I'll give you two because I can't help myself. I think my career was so important to me. I was running a business. I didn't invest in my life. And I met my husband, who's now my ex-husband, late. I was 36. And I fell in love. I got married really quickly, got engaged and married and a baby in 3 years. And my son is absolutely everything. But I also got divorced. And it wasn't the divorce because there was the little Miss Independent, made my own way, but actually not just single motherhood, but not being able to give my son a family and a sense of
Mm.
family. And I had this my mum's got eight, she's one of eight. My dad's got a brother that is his world. And I love my brothers and my mum and dad. And so I've really struggled with that and trying to create family around him on the other side of the world and give him that sense, because families are, they take the edge off you. They
Mm.
are there as your supporters. And so I've really struggled with that. And, in WealthiHer, we've been hacked, we've had money stolen, we've had, it is, and not a little bit of money, a lot of money. And it sometimes you're like, we've just had a pandemic. We've just had a cost of living crisis. And now I've been hacked, and now I've had money stolen, and I have to rise again. And and I see in women and all we do, and I look at female entrepreneurs, leaders, and I just think, God, we're all a bit tired, and you have to rise and rise again. And
Mm.
that is sometimes hard. And I saw this amazing woman yesterday, and she said to me, "How are you?" I was like, "Stop turning your head to the side. I might have a little cry." Stop doing that. Put it straight. Put it straight. And actually, I think we've got to be really careful of burnout. And so I'm kind of, that fight that's gone on over the pandemic. It's been a long stretch,
Mm.
So I come on in the budget. Don't destroy us too much. Give us some hope.
So that kind of struggle, as you say, the things that the world chucks at you is so hard, isn't it? And I love that phrase, rise and rise again, because that's clearly what a lot of adults have to do, right? Is you get hit by stuff and you just have to pick yourself up and you get on. And I think sometimes we look at people who do that because not everybody does, and just think they're superhuman. But the reality is we're all just ploughing on through, right? And that's one of the reasons, as you know, I really wanted to start this podcast, which is just to talk about the humanity and the reality of, being a leader, running a business, hitting challenges. You talked about the journey as an entrepreneur, like rejection and failure is definitely part of that journey. Can tell me, like, what was the most difficult kind of rejection or failure that you've had as a grown up, and kind of how did you process that and kind of and pick yourself up and rise again?
I mean, I think, as a grown up, I think, failing at marriage and failing at family and failing, I didn't date anyone for 5 years. I was like, and my son was everything. And I just suddenly, people, I think my friends were getting worried. They were like, they were trying to like almost intercept men on the street. We'd go to bars and there'd be like some sort of formation movement to try and get me to meet someone. And I pretty much just put myself out of that world. I was just like, and I didn't feel very good. I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel attractive. I didn't feel I was doing a good job for my son. And then I've got this like business on speed and I'm spending time and energy there. And that bit of me has been really good to go back to and sort of refine that alongside business. And again, that balance point, because you can't, sometimes someone said to me, you can't have it all at all times. And that is hard, but actually we do need to have many things. And particularly for the rise and rise again, you've got to put fuel in. And that is as much, love and support from others, your family, your loved ones, and so that's been my big adventure back to myself. And I think it's made me better in all the other realms of my life, so.
So more a development of understanding than a failure. I think, as you say, sometimes we think when a marriage or something like that fails, I think especially as women, we take that really personally, irrelevant of whose fault it is. And I think, putting yourself back out there is a really scary thing to do, right? Especially when you've got other stuff going on with your life and it's not a priority.
Yeah, and that thing that you're reminded of it again and again, people don't invite you to dinners unless you're in a couple, and kids and dinners. And it's, you're almost like, oh, my husband's out. Why don't you come over? Oh, don't worry, but he's on the other side of the world. You're like, but I'm still your friend as if, if it's just me and so you're kind of reminded of it. And it's sort of like a constant reminder. And I think that, so to all those people who have single friends or people who've lost, someone, invite them over anyway.
Yes, I'm with you on that battle. I think as well. What's really interesting about what you're saying is, especially given that you're out there, from a work perspective, you're always at the front of the stage speaking, and you're so confident, and you're so passionate about what you do, and you're so successful, that actually, it's hard sometimes for people to see the other side of you, right? Which is, actually, I found this really hard.
Yeah.
And do you think that's more common than we acknowledge?
So common. And I think, you saw at one of our events just recently, Forever Forward, it was, one of our keynote speakers got ill on the morning, everything was going wrong. And I started to lose my head. And I'm really confident at those things. I've become more confident. And in my head, I got worse and worse and worse. I shooed you off the stage without the questioning. I forgot someone else's thing. And I had to get control. I had to almost go to the bathroom and go, Tamara, get yourself together. This isn't this is not going to continue in a downward spiral. But I then admitted that to everyone in the room. And what broke my heart and warmed my heart was people saying, no, thank you for what you do for us. You've got this. Come on, we're with you. And it just reminded me, people want to see that and the whole reason behind your podcast. They don't want to see the perfect, smiling, happy, on it, dancing around. They want to know that, I'm struggling right now. And I was it really gave me a valuable reminder. We need to share the other side, because it is very hard to rise and rise and rise again.
Yeah. And it's much easier to rise when you've got other people kind of pushing you up there and with you, isn't it? So we've talked about kind of the kind of failures and rejections and the struggles. So I want to flip it on its head and ask you about the best decision you've ever made. Is there one decision where you go, do you know what, that was pivotal?
Yes. So when I had my son, I went into was on a stage, and I could, didn't feel very well. My waters broke early, and I went into labour very early.
Of course,
Nothing was
only you could be on a stage when you went into labour.
No, I know. No, it didn't happen then, but I wasn't feeling very well. And I was like, and it was like 6 weeks early. So I was like, no. And I was wearing heels. And I was like, went home. He came early. And I had hired a managing director, a man, for Cherry London. And he wrote to me in labour, which happened for 3 days. So he had time to think about it. And he said, I don't want to work for you. I want to be you. I'm not taking the job. So I was like, oh my God. So 2 weeks after giving birth, I was interviewing people. And there was this CV that came from the previous, she was the chairwoman of Mediacom Australasia, big media agency. She'd been the CEO, Anne Parsons. And I nearly didn't interview her because I thought, why would she want to come and work with my little company in London? And, I'm too scared. But I thought I'll meet her because she sounds amazing anyway. And she was this wonderful, amazing woman. And because she was experienced, because she had been there, done it, I just got support, light, inspiration. It was one of the most, amazing few years for me. I think she was with me for 4 years. She lived in Paris. She came over in the week. Wow. And one of the things I said to her is, oh, could you do a presentation or something? And she said, oh, darling, I've never done a presentation. My people did that. And she used to draw things. She used to draw them. But this statesman experience who could lead, client relationships at the highest levels. And by then we had, HSBC, O2, all of these clients, I couldn't see them all. And what she gave to the team and to me was amazing. And just obviously her wearing her red leather catsuit to the office was also just fabulous.
Her red leather catsuit. I love that's very similar to your puffer.
Exactly. That's why I was like, a modern, stylish version of who I wanted to be in my red puffer at 24.
And I think that's really interesting. That's such a big decision. And I think, as you say, sometimes people come into your life you're not really expecting. And, as you said, she was really experienced. You didn't really understand it. But what an amazing thing. Even that small decision to actually just interview it, even though you're like, this is not going to work. And such a massive impact.
And I just thought how all for me that nearly didn't meet her because she looked too senior and too serious and not too serious, just too big for me. Yeah. And I think, I've heard that said, hire people that terrify you. And it was the best thing I ever did. And she never terrified me, but she was a force and I learned so much. And we're dear friends to this day.
That's amazing. That's phenomenal. So we're talking about big decisions and advice, and we all get lots of advice over the years. One of the things I'm really fascinated about is the road not taken. What is the best advice you've been given that you didn't take, and what was the impact?
I think that in any business, getting your finance or your COO or your financial COO or your CFO or your finance director or your finance person earlier, and knowing, even if you can't afford them because they're expensive, finding a fractional, finding a way, particularly if you are an entrepreneurial traded person like me, that is all about the ideas and all about the, and I learned a very valuable lesson as well with WealthiHer is, there was a shift in the funding dynamic from when I started the business. It used to be that businesses were going to be funded on future profitability. That changed from 21 to 22 when we were fundraising. I wish I'd had access to that advice because the story I was putting in the market was not what the market had shifted to here because of the shifting in the landscape. If I'd had that advice, I wouldn't have wasted so much energy talking to VCs and having a horrible experience thinking, oh my God, I shouldn't have been there selling a future profit business. I should have been. And we were really lucky, we still raised, nearly £500,000 from high net worth individuals and angels. But it was a journey that it takes a lot to go to market. So I wish I'd had that CFO. And I'd also wish I'd had someone to sort of temper that sort of the ambition that you have for ahead for getting the basics right. And I also learned having an agency is a really easy model. Like you charge clients, you get paid for your time. It's profitable. They pay not always in advance, but they pay and you're clear of your resources. Not always in a timely fashion, but they eventually pay you. Suddenly having a multi-product business with different product lines, different cost lines, you don't have that financial heartbeat and, accounting understanding, it's a huge hindrance. And then as I've subsequently learned, the tech side of cybersecurity, however you get that, it's a new frontier. Woman up on that one.
That must have hit you really hard when WealthiHer got hit. That must have really thrown you.
It was I have to say, it was one of my darkest moments, because as you know, we launched, with the founding voices, we had this amazing sort of thing. We had all these, Dame Arlene Phillips, Kelly Hoppin, Martha Lane Fox, and then they intercepted.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing, isn't it, about being a grown-up, is it's a constant journey. One of the things I find fascinating is, like, you look at people, and we all know people, we think, God, they've really got it together. And the reality is we're all just one crisis away from, like, okay, so what do I do now? And how am I going to impact? And how you approach that. And as you say, you took massive learnings out of it. Look, it'll never happen again. How you approach it, that's like the biggest, scariest bit about being a grown up.
Yeah, because you just have to go, okay, I've just got to go into the fray on this. I remember someone rang me on a Saturday night and they went, do you know that there's cryptocurrency deep linking from your site? And I was like, no. And then that's how we started to discover this journey. And it was a big discovery. It was a big horror. And then the interesting thing is, I've been talking about, relationships at the beginning. In the middle of this meltdown, I was almost probably crying late at night with my small child asleep next to me going, Mummy's not working. And I went on an online dating app and I linked to this man. I was like, okay, yes. And he said, do you want to go to dinner? I was sitting there dealing with all of this, with cybersecurity, lawyers, accountants, and I had my hair in a high ponytail, and I'd messaged him on the side, and I'd messaged him in the morning on the app saying, are we going to dinner? And he never responded, so I didn't go. I was sitting there with the high ponytail and on the side of my head looking terrible, talking to all these people, and they're thinking she's a mad woman. He said, I'm at the restaurant, I'm at the table, and I was like, oh, I'm in a tracksuit in South London. I can be there. And he said, oh, wait. So I went, and actually I went, and he's like, oh, good, I'm so glad you're not wearing the tracksuit and the high pony's gone. I said, yes, I'm sort of on the way here. And actually, and I said, that I shouldn't be meeting you now. My life's falling apart. I said, don't worry, mine is too. So we just had this and actually it's been a joy and a delight and a support, and he knows the whole worst of me.
I love it. There's a big theme of kind of saying yes, throwing yourself at stuff in your life, I feel.
Yeah,
which is amazing.
I do. My friends always say that I take ages to make that decision. You're like, okay, done. I'll just try that.
Right, and I think that takes us to the final question of the podcast, and this is the one I ask absolutely everybody, and it is back to that kind of beginner's guide and the concept of, if a guide existed, what would it say? So what is the one thing that you've learned about being a grown-up that you would put into a beginner's guide?
I think it's harder than you think at unexpected moments that no one prepares you for, that you're like, oh, no one's talked about that. And again, it goes back to your being real, and you're like, that's really difficult. But also it can be more joyful and more fun if we take a lighter view of it, and we gather our loved ones and we laugh a little. And I sometimes forget that. But I think, that is so important and vital, is that you laugh at yourself, laugh at the harder bits, ask other people about their experiences, and be honest with each other about both sides, and give each other, those you love, both sides of it, because we all need it.
So what I'm hearing is it's harder than you can possibly imagine on one hand, but it's so much more fun than you can possibly imagine on the other.
Absolutely. And then you hit 50 and you've got all these adventures you can go on. I can't wait to. Now my son doesn't like me that much. He's like going off, I'm going over to blah blah's house. I'm like, great. I can watch slow horses. Yes. Oh, you're going to your dad's to Cornwall for 5 days. Great. I can go away for the weekend.
Yeah. So you've got that, what is it that Eleanor Mills calls it? The queenagers.
Queenagers. We are here, and we are queenly.
We are. And that's perfect because she is also being interviewed in the next couple of weeks on this podcast. So we will ask her about how she came up with Queen Ager as well. Tamara, it's been such fantastic fun talking to you. Thank you so much with sharing your lived experience, your amazing journey as an entrepreneur. I know you've just rebranded WealthiHer to FFinc, and I'm so excited about that as well for you. And I know it will be a phenomenal success. So thank you so much for your time today. And keep being amazing.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for listening to this episode of A Beginner's Guide to Being a Grown-Up. If you enjoyed it, please like, follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If there's someone who inspires you that you'd like me to interview, you can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram and TikTok. In the meantime, enjoy being a grown-up.